All right, let's jump right in. Ready for a deep dive into the world of plants.
Always ready.
You know, I'm super fascinated by all the stuff you sent over about plant basics.
Yeah.
We're talking like roots, stems, leaves,
The whole 9 yards.
the whole plant package.
Yeah.
And honestly, I kind of geek out about this stuff because it makes you realize how important plants really are.
Absolutely.
They're like the backbone of every ecosystem we've got on land.
You hit the nail on the head.
Without plants, forget about it. So where do we even begin?
Well,
The source material starts with categorizing plants, and
Right.
it begins with this simple idea.
okay.
How big is a plant compared to us?
I like that approach.
Smaller, bigger, about the same.
Yeah, it's intuitive.
It's so smart, right?
It is.
From there, it dives into the three main categories.
Okay.
Herbs, shrubs, and trees.
Makes sense.
So herbs, those are the little guys.
Right.
Like think about basil or mint.
Yeah, those delicate stems.
Their stems are soft and green.
Nothing like a tree trunk.
Exactly. They don't get huge or live super long either.
Right.
Then you've got shrubs, kind of like the middle child.
Okay.
Bigger than herbs. What are your stems?
But not a tree.
But they don't become those towering giants that trees are.
Good point.
A classic shrub, a rose bush.
Perfect example.
And this highlights another difference.
Okay.
Shrubs branch out near the ground.
Well, trees have that single trunk.
Yeah, that one main trunk going straight up.
Exactly.
And finally, the big guys, the trees.
The kings of the plant world.
Thick, strong trunks, branches reaching for the sky.
It's awe-inspiring.
Standing next to a giant tree, it's humbling.
You really feel their age.
They've seen so much history.
Hundreds, even thousands of years.
It blows my mind.
Yeah.
Now, the source material also mentions these other plant types,
Okay.
creepers and climbers.
The rule breakers.
They don't quite fit in those neat categories.
Right.
What makes them so different?
Mm.
Creepers, those are the ones hugging the ground,
Spreading out.
like pumpkins, watermelons,
Those long vines.
sending out those vines that crawl along.
Yeah.
Climbers, those are the adventurers, always reaching up.
Using anything for support.
They use other plants or structures to climb higher,
Towards the sunlight.
like beans or grapes. You see them in gardens all the time.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how plants have found different ways to thrive.
So many adaptations.
Okay, so we've got a handle on the types of plants.
All right.
Now let's zoom in on a crucial part, the stems.
Stems are fascinating.
I'm really excited about this because the source has this cool experiment
Oh, yeah.
to show how stems work.
I've always wanted to try that.
It's about how stems are like two-way highways.
Transporting stuff throughout the plant.
Exactly. It's like a busy city with delivery trucks going everywhere.
Love that analogy.
So picture this. You take a stem,
Okay.
like a celery stalk, and stick it in water with food coloring.
Red or blue. Right.
Yeah, and then you watch as the color moves up the stem.
It's like magic
It really is. What's happening is that the water's being pulled up.
against gravity.
I know, right? We'll talk about how that's even possible later.
Looking forward to that.
But this experiment shows us that water goes from the roots to the leaves.
It's a clear demonstration.
And it's not just water.
Nutrients, too.
The stem carries nutrients from the soil up to the leaves as well.
Essential for plant growth.
So stems are like these bustling transportation hubs.
Definitely.
But wait a second, water moving up.
It's counterintuitive.
How does it defy gravity?
That's where it gets really interesting.
We have to dive into the world of xylem and phloem.
The plant's vascular system.
These are the two types of tissues that make up this plant highway.
Xylem for water and minerals.
Xylem is responsible for moving water and minerals upwards.
And phloem for the sugars.
And it uses this amazing thing called capillary action.
Capillary action sounds like a superpower.
Tell me about it. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Well, it's real science.
But how does it work?
Think about how a paper towel soaks up a spill.
Okay, yeah.
That's capillary action in action.
So that's how plants get water up their stems.
It's part of the process.
That's pretty wild.
It is.
But what about the force that's pulling the water?
Right, so that force comes from transpiration.
Transpiration.
It's a process that happens in the leaves.
We'll get into that more when we talk about leaves.
Definitely.
But essentially, water evaporates from the leaves.
Creating a tension.
And that pulls the entire chain of water molecules upwards from the roots.
All the way through the xylem.
So it's like a tug of war.
Between cohesion, adhesion, and transpiration.
And somehow, water wins against gravity.
Amazing, isn't it?
It really is. And this incredible system
It's what allows even the tallest trees,
is how even the tallest trees get water from their roots to their leaves.
hundreds of feet up.
Way up high. Mind-blowing. Okay, so we know how water moves up the stem
And carries nutrient.
and that it carries vital nutrients to where is all this water going?
Good question.
What are those nutrients used for?
That brings us to the leaves.
To answer those questions, we need to turn our attention to the powerhouses of the plant world. The leaves.
Ready for more?
Absolutely.
All right, welcome back to our plant deep dive.
We've been talking about stems,
Those transportation hubs,
delivering water and nutrients up against gravity.
it's pretty remarkable. But now,
Time for the leaves.
it's time for the leaves. Those vibrant, often beautifully patterned
the powerhouses of the plant.
powerhouses of the plant world.
I like that.
You know, when you stop and think about it,
Yeah.
leaves are pretty incredible.
They are.
Like they're these tiny solar panels,
Capturing energy from the sun
capturing the sun's energy, converting it into fuel
for the whole plant.
for the entire plant. But there's always been this thing about photosynthesis
Okay.
that's always seemed kind of mysterious to me.
What do you mean?
Like, what's actually going on in there?
Right.
Can't just be sunlight in, sugar out.
Yeah.
Right. You're right to question that. Photosynthesis is often oversimplified.
Okay.
It's way more complex than that.
So what's the real deal?
Well, imagine each leaf as this mini factory,
Like a little factory.
bustling with activity.
Okay.
Inside the cells of a leaf,
Uh-huh.
there are these special structures called chloroplasts.
Chloroplasts.
And they're the real stars of the show.
Chloroplasts. I remember learning about those
Back in school,
back in the day. But to be honest,
the details are fuzzy.
the details are a bit fuzzy. Can we do a quick refresher?
Of course. So chloroplasts contain this green pigment
Chlorophyll.
called chlorophyll.
Which is why plants are green.
Exactly. But more importantly,
Okay.
chlorophyll is the key to capturing light energy from the sun.
So it's like the solar panel
On our little leaf factory,
on our mini leaf factory. It absorbs the sunlight.
absorbs that light energy.
Okay, got it. But then what?
That's where things get really interesting.
Great, I'm ready.
That captured light energy,
Yeah.
it's used to split water molecules.
Split water molecules. Wow.
And that releases oxygen as a byproduct.
And that's the oxygen we breathe.
The very same. But the real magic is when that split water molecule
Yeah.
combines with carbon dioxide from the air
To form glucose.
to create glucose, a simple sugar.
So it's like a tiny chemistry set
Rearranging molecule.
creating fuel for the plant.
Precisely. And that
The
glucose,
sugar.
that simple sugar,
It's like the basic energy building block
the whole plant.
for the plant. It can be used right away or stored for later.
Exactly.
And that's why plants are the base of ecosystems.
They create the energy.
They create the energy that fuels the entire food web.
All the way up.
It's mind-blowing.
It is.
But hold on, we talked about stems being two-way streets,
Right.
carrying water up and nutrients down. What about this glucose made in the leaves?
Good.
How does that get to the rest of the plants?
That's where phloem comes in.
Okay.
The other type of vascular tissue.
Right, we talked about
That's
that.
right, xylem.
For water,
Xylem is for water transport upwards.
upwards.
Up.
But phloem. Phloem is the sugar delivery system.
You got it.
It carries the glucose made in the leaves
To every part of the plant.
to all the other parts.
Yeah.
Roots, stems, flowers, fruits.
Everything.
So it's like the plant's internal delivery service,
I like that.
making sure everyone gets their sugar fix.
Exactly.
I'm starting to see how all these systems within the plant
They're all connected,
are all connected. It's like a well-coordinated team.
working together,
Each part has its own role
keeping the plant alive.
to keep the whole plant alive and thriving.
Great analogy.
And just like with a team,
Yeah,
the plant's success depends on each system working efficiently.
absolutely.
But there's another cool aspect of leaves that we haven't talked about yet.
What's that?
Transpiration.
Transpiration.
Remember that colored water experiment?
Yeah.
Well, transpiration is what creates that pulling force
That pulls the water up the stem.
that gets the water up the stem.
It's all connected.
So transpiration is connected to water movement.
For sure.
But what exactly is it?
Simply put, transpiration is when water evaporates from the leaves
Okay.
through tiny openings called stomata.
So it's like the plant is sweating,
You could say that.
releasing water vapor into the air,
Exactly.
like those little water droplets that form inside a plastic bag.
When you seal a leafy branch inside.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah, that's a great visual.
It's a perfect way to see transpiration in action.
Exactly.
In this simple process,
It drives the entire water transport system.
drives the whole water transport system within the plant.
It's amazing.
Wow, so transpiration is like the engine,
Keeping the water flow.
keeping the water flowing up through the xylem.
Powered by the sun.
And it's all powered by the sun, just like photosynthesis.
Everything is connected.
It's incredible how efficient and connected it all is.
It is.
But wait, If the plant's always losing water through transpiration,
Good question.
wouldn't it eventually dry out?
That's where the balance comes in.
Okay.
Between water uptake by the roots and water loss through transpiration.
The plant has to constantly regulate
The opening and closing.
the opening and closing of its stomata
To control water loss.
so it doesn't dry out.
Right, but it still needs to allow gas exchange.
To take in carbon dioxide
With photosynthesis.
and release oxygen.
It's a balancing act.
It's like a delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
Constantly adjusting
To maintain the right amount of water.
to keep the right amount of water inside.
Exactly.
And this balance is affected by all sorts of things.
Like temperature, humidity.
Temperature, humidity, even how much water is in the soil.
It all plays a role.
That's why plants in dry places
Like deserts.
have those adaptations to minimize water loss.
Like thick, waxy leaves.
Or smaller leaves.
Smart adaptations.
It's amazing how plants have figured out how to live in such different environments.
From rainforests to deserts.
From rainforests to deserts, they've got it all figured out.
They do.
Speaking of adaptations. The source material mentions this cool activity
Okay.
that highlights the different root systems we talked about.
Taproots and fibrous roots.
Taproots and fibrous roots. Have you ever tried growing gram and maize seeds in cotton?
I have. It's a classic experiment.
I haven't, but it sounds fun.
Yeah.
What happens?
It's a great way to see those two different root systems develop.
Okay.
Gram seeds,
Like you got it.
they develop a taproot.
Like a carrot.
One thick root going straight down.
Maize seeds, on the other hand,
Being monocots.
they develop fibrous roots.
Spreading out horizontally.
I could just picture those tiny white roots growing through the cotton.
It's fascinating to watch.
But why have one type of root over another?
That's a great question. Taproots are great for anchoring.
And reaching deep for water.
Reaching deep down for water and nutrients.
So they're perfect for dry environments.
Exactly.
Fibrous roots, though,
They're better at absorbing from a wider area.
near the surface,
So they're good for areas with shallow soil.
or where there's more frequent rain.
It all depends on the environment.
So the type of root a plant has
It's all about survival.
is directly tied to its environment and how it survives.
Yes.
It's amazing how every part of a plant is connected to thriving in its habitat.
It's all about connections.
And here's another cool connection.
What's that?
Remember when we talked about leaf venation?
Reticulate and parallel.
Reticulate and parallel. There's a link between those patterns and root types.
You notice that?
Plants with reticulate venation
I like Graham.
tend to have taproots,
Right.
and plants with parallel venation
Gaze.
usually have fibrous roots.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
So you can tell what kind of root system a plant has just by looking at its leaves.
It's a good indicator.
That's like a plant detective game. I'm going to
Ah.
be checking out leaf veins from now on.
You should. It's a fun way to see the connections.
It's all about those connections. It just shows how interconnected everything is.
And the plant work.
Structure and function all working together.
It's beautiful.
Wow, we've covered so much.
From photosynthesis,
Tiny details of photosynthesis,
inspiration,
the different root systems.
and their connection to leaf venation.
Leaves are so much more than just pretty decorations.
They're essential.
They capture energy, transport water, even influence root development.
Well said.
It's incredible.
It
Hey,
is.
before we move on,
Okay.
I want to emphasize something about transpiration.
Yeah.
It plays a big role in regulating the plant's temperature.
It's like the plant's cooling system.
As water evaporates from the leaves,
It cools the plant down.
just like sweating helps us regulate our temperature.
Exactly.
So transpiration isn't just about water transport.
It's multifunctional.
It's also about keeping the plant cool.
right.
I'm really starting to see how all these processes,
That are all interconnected?
they're all interconnected and essential for survival.
Absolutely.
It's like a delicate dance,
Between different systems.
keeping everything in harmony.
And this interconnectedness,
It goes beyond the individual plant.
it affects the whole ecosystem.
Plant transpiration contributes to the water cycle,
Releasing water vapor into the atmosphere.
which then falls back to Earth as rain or snow.
It's a cycle.
It's a powerful reminder that plants aren't just passive bystanders.
They're active participants.
They actively shape the world around them
from their local ecosystem.
to the global climate.
Yeah.
And that brings us to our next topic. Plant interaction.
Ready to dive in?
Plant interactions and their vital role in supporting life on Earth.
It's a fascinating area.
I'm ready to explore. Welcome back to our Plant Deep Dive. We've gone deep into these amazing organisms,
From photosynthesis to transpiration.
all those intricate processes, how they adapt,
It's incredible.
But it's important to remember, plants aren't just living in a vacuum.
They're not isolated.
They're interacting with their surroundings, with other living things.
Constantly.
They're shaping the world and being shaped by it.
It's a two-way street.
We've been focusing on what's going on inside plants,
The inner workings
but their interactions with the outside world,
are just as fascinating.
those are just as important for their survival.
Absolutely.
Like, think about a sunflower
Following the sun.
following the sun across the sky, or a vine
Those tendrils.
wrapping its tendrils around a support.
Amazing adaptations.
It's almost like plants have some kind of awareness,
It does seem that way.
don't you think?
It does.
These responses to the outside world,
We call them tropisms.
they're called tropisms.
And they're vital for a plant's success.
That's sunflower's sun tracking.
Heliotropism
It's called heliotropism.
ensures maximum sunlight.
That way, it gets the most sunlight for photosynthesis.
Exactly.
And that vine climbing up,
Thigmotropism.
that's hypnotropism, right?
You got it.
It lets it reach higher to compete for sunlight.
Especially in crowded spaces.
So these tropisms, they're not just cool to watch.
They have a purpose.
They're essential for survival.
Absolutely.
Speaking of survival, this source material mentions some clever defense mechanisms
Oh, yeah.
plants have evolved
To protect themselves.
to protect themselves from hungry herbivores.
That's constant battle.
It's like a botanical arms race.
I like that. Think about thorns.
Thorns, spines,
Those prickly hairs.
those prickly hairs, yeah. Making some plants.
Not so friendly to touch.
Definitely not something you want to grab. Those physical deterrents,
They work pretty well.
they can really discourage a hungry animal.
From taking a bite.
Ouch, I've had my share of run-ins with thorny bushes.
We've all been there.
But it's not just about physical defenses, right?
Yeah.
The source also mentions
Chemical defenses
some plants produce toxic chemicals.
to protect themselves.
Talk about a chemical warfare.
It can get pretty sophisticated.
So it's not just thorns and prickles.
Well,
Some plants have these bitter compounds
making them taste awful.
or even toxins
That can be harmful.
that can really harm an herbivore.
All about survival.
Wow, plants have some serious defense strategies.
They've had to adapt.
But like you said, it's an arms race.
Right.
The herbivores aren't just giving up, are they?
Oh, no.
They've got their own tricks up their
Well,
sleeves.
Millions of years of evolution.
They've evolved ways to deal with those plant defenses,
Specialized digestive systems.
like breaking down toxins.
Or learning to avoid certain plants.
So it's this constant back and forth.
Plants versus herbivores.
Plants developing new defenses.
Herbivores finding ways to overcome them.
It just shows you how dynamic evolution is,
Always changing.
constantly shaping those relationships between organisms.
It's fascinating.
And this whole co-evolutionary dance,
Between plants and herbivores.
it has a huge impact
On biodiversity.
on the diversity of life on Earth
It drives the evolution of new species.
and shapes whole ecosystems.
It's all connected.
It's amazing how much those interactions influence everything.
It is.
Okay, so we've got plants defending themselves from being eaten,
Right.
but they're also competing with each other, right?
Of course.
For sunlight, water, nutrients.
All those essential resources.
There's like a constant competition.
for survival.
Think about a dense forest.
Trees vying for sunlight.
All those trees trying to get a spot in the sun.
The taller ones have an advantage.
But the smaller plants have to adapt.
They find their own ways.
Maybe by growing fast in the spring.
Before the trees leaf out.
Or by tolerating the shade.
Clever strategies.
So even in a peaceful forest,
There's a battle going on.
there's this competition happening underground.
It's a hidden world.
It's mind-blowing. It's a reminder that even in the calmest places,
There's a struggle for survival.
there's this constant fight for resources.
Exactly.
But despite all this competition,
There's also cooperation
there's also this amazing cooperation and interdependence.
between plant communities,
Some plants support others, like vines climbing trees.
providing a framework,
Some plants help fix nitrogen in the soil.
making it available for others.
And of course, there's pollination.
Bees, butterflies.
Plants relying on pollinators to help them reproduce.
It's a delicate balance.
So it's this intricate web of interactions,
Competition and cooperation.
shaping the dynamics of plant communities.
It's a complex dance.
And this web,
Extends beyond just plants.
it goes beyond plants to include the entire ecosystem.
The whole interconnected web of life.
Plants are the foundation of most ecosystems on land.
providing food and shelter.
They provide food and shelter for so many animals,
From insects to mammals.
and their role in oxygen production
And carbon dioxide absorption.
is crucial for regulating the climate.
It's amazing.
It's incredible how these often overlooked organisms
They're so vital.
are so vital for life as we know it.
Absolutely.
We've only scratched the surface today.
Just a glimpse.
But I feel like I have this whole new appreciation for plants.
I'm glad to hear that.
Next time I see a plant,
Take a closer look.
I'll be looking at it with new eyes,
Seeing all the connections.
knowing all the amazing things happening inside.
And all around it.
It's been an incredible journey.
The plant world is full of wonders.
And I want to thank you for sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep appreciating the wonders of the natural world.
I couldn't have said it better myself.